Particles are something in Blender that you can start really easy with and kind of get familiar, and they have a bit of complexity if you want to go more advanced. But just starting out, it is pretty simple to start with. So we first need an object that will be kind of an emitter from where we want our particles to come from. So we can select our cube in the beginning and then click on this particle properties. And here we just need to click plus, and then we can have a particle system. At any point you can click plus again and then create another particle system, but so you can combine them on the same mesh, but for now we just want one. So we just created a simple particle system that we did not touch in any way, and you can just click space from the beginning, and then the particles are basically going. And you can see this red line that happens in our timeline, and that basically shows us how much particles have rendered, and we can also pre-render them. So if we go back down and go to cache, we can click bake, and now everything is pre-made for us and it will not generate while we play. So the more complicated particles you create, the longer it will take to bake over time. So if I delete all bakes, so now we don't have something that is pre-cached. Let's change the number to 10,000. And now if I click space, it is going a bit slower with the rendering, and if I try to bake, it will take a bit longer. Now it still went pretty fast since we don't have anything complicated, but it will be taking longer and longer time. So let's go back to 1000. And now you also have your frame start and frame end, and this basically determines from when to when will the particles be spawning. But that does not mean that particles will stop existing after that point. So we can see that they still are going, but their lifetime is way longer than these frames. So we can see lifetime 50. So at some point, also these last particles that we created at frame 200 will be gone in frame 250, because that's 50 frames of lifetime that they have. If we add a lifetime, let's say 20 or lifetime random to 1, and then it can be anywhere from 0 to 100. So they, if we will have to now pre-bake all of them, and then we can see the variation happening after we go through 200. So that's basically the starting point. You also have the seed if you want to randomize things a bit. So if I go to 1, now it's gonna be different starting point instead of having the same every time. And if you really like one of the seeds, you can just remember the number or save it in here, don't change it, and then it will have same start each time. Of course, if you change some properties, it will change the seed, so you have to be careful there. And of course, at any point you can change from when your particle starts, so particle emitter starts, so you can move from 50 if you want, so it won't do anything, but if it comes to 50, it will start spawning them. Let's do this 0. And for really complicated particle effects, you want to bake them, so your preview is closer to real time, because right now it is kind of real time, but we have a real simple scene. But for bigger scenes, it might take like a second per frame or something to render particles. So doing it before would be way better than doing it later. So let's minimize cache, and let's see what else we have. So first thing that we have is physics. So this is basically determining, I'm also going to set frame start to 1. This is basically determining some basic physics of your object. So if I do 5 kilograms, that means that my particles are way heavier, so they're gonna start falling faster. We also have Brownian motion, which is basically the random jittering of particles. So if I put this to, let's say, 40, try to play them, we can see how particles are kind of moving more erratic, and then they're not going directly down. And if you set this to maybe 100, we can see that random motion is so random that some particles even go up. And this can be, of course, helpful in some situations. Let's put this to 0. Then you have drag and damp, which is basically air drag, and then damping, which is how much damp is on the movement of your particles. So we can see if we add a lot of damp, that basically means that they're gonna move really, really slow. And they're still pulled by gravity because their mass is 1. But if I put it to 0, actually let's remove this. This should, oh yeah, it multiplies with size, okay. Then 0 won't work. But basically this is where you would change your damping, so your particles basically move through space slower. Okay, next thing is velocity. This is a basic thing where just normals from your object can give some force to the particles. So this face will spawn some particles basically as any other face, but this face has normal on the x, and then this face has normal on the y, and we can say that we want a little bit of push from this face instead of just dropping straight down. So if I change this to 0, it will just go straight down. And if I change this to, let's say, 10, it should kind of spray it out way more and then start going down, which by itself creates a nice effect. That is one thing. Then you have your randomize. I don't think this works with, oh, it does. It basically gives a bit of random motion instead of putting it. So if I push this straight up, we can also give it a bit more random motion left and right, so it kind of does not go straight up, but it kind of curves a bit. We can also just add object velocity, and it gives more and more random motion, which will help with realism, because things do not go perfectly straight up, left, right, and stuff like that. There is also rotation that you can do. Now, this is not usually something that I would use, but you can also rotate your object. We can now see it less because we don't have any object generated in here, but it would be basically rotating. And one thing that I forgot to mention here is that we have this hair. So instead of having particles, we can also have hair, which is basically from each face. We can have as many hairs as we want, and we can increase the number in here. And also what we can do with hair, which will be useful later, is you can have children, which is basically adding more hair on the places. So this emission will have like a one single strand, and then that one single strand can have, like, let's say, right now on the render it will have 100 more hairs, each of the 1 hairs. So if I try to visualize this in my viewport, it will look like this. So this will look how this is how it would look like when we render. And the reason for this is that the hair is really dense, but if you use this emission and let's say type 100,000, which would be the same as using this simple, it will be way less performative. Even now I can feel a bit of performance drop. It will be way less performative if you just typed 100,000 in here emissions. So using this simple or interpolated way is way more performative, but it might look, depending on how much emission you have in here, it might look a bit weird and clamped on. So if I put on the emission, let's say 100, you can see how they kind of start sticking together more, and maybe 10. Yeah, and we can also use simple to kind of show it more. But you can see, since we only have 10 emitters, it will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and there is 10th one maybe here. And each one of them has just a little bit hair around, and it gets really visible the lower numbers you go. So that's one thing to keep in mind when using children. Maybe interpolated might be a bit better, but they start clamping together, so you want to have decent number of emissions in the beginning, and then it will look more natural in here. But let's go back in here. There is also render, and in here you can use basically other objects to create particles. So if we, let's say, select a cone and go here in the render, we can select the cone in here, and then that there should be created render object cone, and now they are created instead of particles, and that's something that we can do here. Let's see if we have number, seed, frame, lifetime. So basically on each particle we are creating a bunch of cones, and I can disable also rotation in here so we can see them without rotating. But basically what you can do is use objects and then use them as instanced objects, so you don't have to actually use the dots or create anything special. You can just use objects for particles. This is good for things like snow or dust particles and stuff like that. So yeah, that's kind of the basics of how you start working with particles. For more advanced things, you also have children. So we can set this to none. So you just have a singular object in here, but you can also interpolate, which again gives you that complexity without increasing too much performance. But for particles, you probably don't even want to use this. Usually this is way more useful with a hair. You also have field weights, so how much general gravity of your scene affects this specific particle. Vortex force, because you have different forces that you can add. Force field, so maybe you want to add wind in a certain direction. Maybe we need to increase, let's see. We need power. Maybe this one. There's basically forces that you can apply to the particles, and this way you can have general wind force, and then you have your particles that will be moved, and then inside the particles you can have these field weights. So maybe for some reason this particle is affected by let's see what this would be, by wind, maybe 0.5, and then you can set all the particles to be less affected by wind if that is something that you would need. So this can get way more complicated. I would advise kind of playing around, seeing what each option does. But yeah, this is kind of introduction to the particles in Blender.